I don't think we were seeing things right. That's what I kept telling myself as we trudged across that frozen hellscape, wind cutting through our thermal gear like it wasn't even there. The six of us were spread out in standard formation, nobody talking much. Too damn cold for conversation. "Cook," Ronnie's voice crackled through my comms. "You seeing this?" I squinted through my goggles. At first I thought it was just another ice formation. The Arctic's good at playing tricks on your eyes. But then, the shape started making sense. "Hold position," I said, raising my fist. The team stopped immediately. "Wayne, what's the scanner say?" Lieutenant Espinosa was already checking his equipment, methodical as always. "Nothing, Captain. No heat signatures. No metal detection. According to this, there's nothing there." But there was definitely something there. About 200 yards ahead, half buried in snow and ice, sat what looked exactly like an old warplane. German markings, World War II era. "Spread out. Approach with caution," I ordered, keeping my voice steady despite the unease building in my gut. We moved forward slowly, our boots crunching through the crusted snow. Hunter stayed slightly behind, maintaining comms with base. Elijah kept his medical kit ready, standard procedure, though we weren't expecting to need it out here. This was supposed to be a routine patrol, checking reports of unusual activity in this sector. Finding a 70-year-old German bomber wasn't in the briefing. As we got closer, I could see it more clearly. A Heinkel He-111. I recognized it from my grandfather's old war books. Twin-engine medium bomber, standard for the Luftwaffe during the war. This one looked pristine, like it had landed yesterday, not decades ago. "Captain," Wayne called out, frustration evident in his voice. "Equipment still showing nothing. It's like it's not even there." "I can see it just fine," Ronnie said, now only 20 yards from the aircraft. "We all can," I replied. "But technology doesn't lie." "Neither do our eyes, sir," Elijah added. I nodded. "Hunter, notify base we've found something unusual. Send coordinates." "Already did, Captain. They're confused. Say there's no record of any crash sites in this area." Of course there wasn't. This plane hadn't crashed. It had landed. The positioning was too perfect, the body too intact, and the snow pattern around it suggested it had been here for a very long time, yet the aircraft itself showed no signs of weathering, no rust, no deterioration. I reached the fuselage first, the others hanging back slightly per my hand signal. The black iron cross was vivid against the pale gray metal. I reached out slowly and pressed my gloved hand against the side. Solid, cold, real. "It's here, all right," I confirmed, turning back to my team. "Wayne, do another sweep with the equipment. Ronnie, with me. Let's find a way in." We circled the aircraft, looking for entry points. The main hatch was on the underside, partially buried in ice, but visible. "We're going to need to clear this," I said, pulling out my field shovel. Ronnie did the same, and we started digging around the hatch. The metal scraped against ice, the sound echoing across the empty landscape. After about 10 minutes of work, we'd cleared enough to see the hatch mechanism. "Looks operational," Ronnie observed, brushing away the last bits of snow with his glove. "Should we try it?" I hesitated. Military protocol said we should secure the site and wait for a specialized team. But we were already here, and something about this situation felt urgent, like we needed to know what was inside. "Let's do it," I decided. "Wayne, Elijah, Hunter, maintain perimeter. Ronnie and I will check the interior." The hatch was stuck, but not locked. Ronnie and I put our weight into it, and with a groan of metal that hadn't moved in decades, it gave way. Cold, stale air rushed out. Not the smell of decay or mold you'd expect from something that had been sitting in ice for 70 years. Just emptiness. "I'll go first," I said, clicking on my flashlight and drawing my sidearm. Standard procedure, though it felt silly pointing a gun at a historical relic. The beam of light cut through the darkness of the aircraft's interior. I pulled myself up through the hatch, Ronnie following close behind. Inside, it was like stepping back in time. The bomb bay was empty but intact. No signs of damage or even wear. The instruments, the wiring, the metal frame, all of it looked new. "This doesn't make sense," Ronnie muttered behind me. "This thing should be rusted through, damaged by ice expansion. Something." "Let's check the cockpit," I said, moving forward carefully. The narrow passage to the front of the aircraft was clear. No debris, no signs of struggle or emergency. Just an abandoned warplane in perfect condition. The cockpit door was closed. I pressed my ear against it first, old habit from urban combat training. Nothing. "Ready?" I asked Ronnie, who nodded, his hand on his holstered weapon. I pushed the door open slowly, flashlight beam sweeping the small space. There was someone in the pilot's seat. I nearly stumbled backward, my training barely keeping me from shouting in surprise. "Jesus Christ," Ronnie whispered. The figure was strapped into the seat, wearing a full Luftwaffe flight uniform. Not a skeleton, not a mummified corpse, a person. Ancient, withered, skin like parchment stretched over bone, but unmistakably human. And then it moved. The head turned slightly toward the light, eyelids fluttering, dry lips parted. "He's alive," I said, holstering my weapon immediately. "Elijah, get in here now." I heard movement behind us as Elijah scrambled through the hatch. The pilot's mouth was moving, forming words without sound. I leaned closer, trying to hear. "Müssen zurückkehren. Sie warten auf uns. Die Dunkelheit." German. I didn't understand it, but Wayne might. He had some language training. "Wayne, get in here too," I called out. "Hunter, radio base. Tell them we need immediate medevac. We've found a survivor." The old man's eyes opened fully now, cloudy blue, unfocused. His withered hand twitched against the control yoke, still strapped in after all this time. "How is this possible?" Elijah asked, squeezing into the cockpit with his medical kit. "He should be dead." "Worry about that later," I said. "Check his vitals." Elijah worked quickly, his training overcoming his obvious shock. Pulse is present but weak, breathing shallow. Temperature, I can't get an accurate reading. He's cold, but not frozen. Wayne arrived, ducking his head into the cramped space. "What's he saying?" The pilot was still mumbling, the same phrases over and over. "Something about returning," Wayne translated hesitantly. "They're waiting for us. The darkness." "We need to get him out of here," I decided. Carefully. "Elijah, what's the safest way to move him?" "We need a backboard, neck stabilization. He's incredibly fragile." I nodded. "Wayne, Hunter, go back to our gear. Get the emergency stretcher." They left quickly. Ronnie stood by the cockpit door, watching the old man with obvious unease. "Captain," he said quietly, "this isn't right. No one could survive out here for days, let alone decades." "I know," I replied, "but he's alive, and we're getting him out." It took us 20 minutes to carefully extract the pilot from his seat. His uniform crumbled in places as we moved him, ancient fabric giving way. The man himself was light, unnaturally so, like moving a hollow shell, but he was breathing, still mumbling those same German phrases. "Medevac ETA 12 minutes, Hunter reported as we secured the pilot to the stretcher. We carried him out through the hatch, back into the harsh Arctic daylight. The wind had picked up, snow starting to blow sideways across the landscape. "Set up a shelter," I ordered. "We need to keep him stable until the helicopter arrives." We worked quickly, erecting the emergency thermal tent over the stretcher. Elijah stayed with the pilot, monitoring his impossible vital signs. 11 minutes later, we heard the distant thump of helicopter blades. I stepped out of the shelter to signal with a flare. The Black Hawk appeared through the swirling snow, Captain Teresa Herman at the controls with Lieutenant Caden McGuire as co-pilot. I'd worked with them before. Herman was one of the best pilots in the unit. Steady hands and nerves of steel. The helicopter touched down about 50 yards from our position, rotors still spinning as the medical team jumped out and rushed toward us. "What the hell have you got out here, Cook?" Herman shouted over the noise as she approached. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I replied. Just get him back to base, fast. The medical team took over, transferring the ancient pilot to their gurney. He was still mumbling, still alive against all logic and reason. "We'll take good care of your mummy," Herman said, with a half smile. "You guys need extraction too?" "Negative," I answered. "We need to secure the site. Another team's on the way." Herman nodded, already turning back toward her helicopter. "See you back at base then." We watched as they loaded the pilot into the helicopter. The medical team worked efficiently, securing him for transport. McGuire gave us a thumbs up from the cockpit as Herman started increasing power to the rotors. The Black Hawk lifted off, snow swirling beneath it as it rose into the gray sky. I was just turning back toward the bomber when Herman's voice burst through my radio, high and panicked. "Mayday! Mayday! Control's not responding. We're..." The helicopter lurched violently to one side, then began spinning. Not the controlled rotation of a landing approach. This was a tailspin, rapid and catastrophic. "Herman!" I shouted into my radio. "Pull up!" No response, just the sound of alarms in the background. We watched, helpless, as the Black Hawk spiraled downward, disappearing behind a ridge about a mile away. The explosion came seconds later, a bright orange fireball rising above the snow-covered terrain, black smoke billowing into the gray sky. "No," I whispered, already running. "No, no, no." But I knew before we even started toward the crash site. Nobody could have survived that impact, that explosion. Captain Teresa Herman and Lieutenant Caden McGuire were gone. The explosion's echo faded. The smoke kept rising, black against the gray sky. I stood there with my fist clenched around my radio, knuckles white. 2 good people gone. Just like that. "Captain?" Wayne's voice came from behind me. "Captain, what do we do?" I took a breath. Couldn't let myself fall apart. Not here, not now. 5 of us left, plus 1 half-dead German pilot who shouldn't even exist. I turned to face my team. "We call it in," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Hunter, get base on comms. Tell them we've lost Herman and McGuire. Aircraft down, no survivors. Request immediate extraction." Hunter nodded and moved away, already working the radio. The kid's face had gone pale, but his hands were steady. Good man. "What about him?" Ronnie jerked his head toward our shelter where the German lay. "We keep him stable till extraction arrives." I looked back at the smoke rising from behind the ridge, and we figure out what the hell just happened. "You think it's connected?" Wayne asked. "The crash and him?" I didn't answer right away. The wind cut through my thermal gear, and I pulled my collar tighter. "Captain, base acknowledges," Hunter called. "Extraction's coming, but weather's deteriorating. ETA 4 hours minimum." 4 hours. Shit. "All right," I said. "Elijah, stay with the pilot. Monitor his condition. The rest of you, with me." "Where are we going, sir?" Ronnie asked. I turned toward the bomber. "Back inside. There's something in there we missed." Wayne shook his head. "With all due respect, sir, we should stay put. Wait for extraction. We just lost..." "I know what we lost, Lieutenant," I snapped. The image of the helicopter spinning out of control flashed through my mind. I took another breath. "Sorry. But that crash wasn't mechanical failure. Herman was too good a pilot. Something caused it, and our answers are in there." Nobody argued. We grabbed our gear and headed back to the aircraft. The Heinkel sat half buried in the snow, looking exactly like what it was, a relic from another time that had no business being here. "Lights on," I ordered as we approached the hatch. "Standard formation. We go straight through the bomb bay to the rear compartment." One by one, we climbed inside. The stale air hit me again, but this time, it felt different. Heavier somehow. I clicked on my flashlight and led the way through the bomb bay. "Sir," Wayne said, "scanners still show nothing. According to this equipment, we're standing in empty space." "Keep trying," I said, "and watch for anything unusual." Hunter snorted behind me. "More unusual than a perfectly preserved Nazi bomber with a living pilot from World War II? "Yeah," I said, "more unusual than that." We moved past the cockpit, the door still ajar from when we'd extracted the pilot. Beyond it lay the cargo hold, a space about 20 feet long, packed with equipment and supplies. "Spread out," I ordered. "Check everything. Crates, equipment, anything that looks important." The cargo hold was in the same pristine condition as the rest of the aircraft. No rust, no decay, just a light coating of frost. The crates were stacked neatly against the walls, secured with canvas straps. German labels marked each one. "Wayne, what do these say?" I pointed to the nearest crate. He moved closer, shining his light on the stenciled letters. "Standard supplies, ammunition, rations, medical equipment." He moved to another crate. "Same here. Nothing special." Ronnie was checking the far wall. "Hey, Captain, look at this." I crossed to where he stood. He'd pulled back a canvas tarp to reveal what looked like scientific equipment. Glass tubes, metal containers, instruments I didn't recognize. "Wayne," I called. He joined us, studying the labels. "Research materials, classified." He frowned. "There's a reference number here, but no indication what it's for." I moved deeper into the hold, sweeping my light across the floor and walls. That's when I saw it at the very back, a metal container about 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, like a coffin, but made of some dark metal with heavy clasps along one side. "Over here," I called. The team gathered around as I crouched beside the container. It had German writing etched into the metal on top, not stenciled or painted, carved directly into the surface. "Wayne, what's it say?" He knelt beside me, running his gloved fingers over the inscription. His expression changed. "Nicht öffnen, lass es nicht heraus, lass es nicht sterben," he read slowly, then translated. "Do not open, do not let it out, do not let it die." Hunter took a step back. "That's contradictory. And creepy as hell," Ronnie added. I studied the container. The locking mechanism was simple. 5 mechanical latches that could be opened manually. No high-tech security, just basic hardware that would have been standard in the 1940s. "Captain," Wayne said quietly, "I don't think we should open this." I stood up, thinking of Herman and McGuire. Their helicopter had been fine until they loaded the pilot. Something had caused that crash, and I needed answers. "We need to know what we're dealing with," I said. "If this is connected to what happened to Herman and McGuire, if it says do not open, maybe we should listen," Hunter cut in. "It also says don't let it die," I pointed out, "which means whatever's in here needs attention." I made my decision. "I'm opening it, stay alert." I knelt back down and reached for the first latch. It was cold under my gloved fingers but moved easily. No rust, no resistance. The metal made a soft click as the latch disengaged. "Sir," Wayne said, "for the record, I think this is a bad idea." "Noted, Lieutenant." I moved to the second latch. Click. Ronnie and Hunter had taken positions on either side of the container, weapons ready. Smart move, though I wasn't sure what good guns would do against whatever had taken down a Black Hawk. Third latch. Click. "Captain," Wayne said suddenly. The pilot's readings just spiked on Elijah's monitor. I paused, hand hovering over the fourth latch. What kind of spike? Heart rate, blood pressure, everything. He just went from barely alive to highly agitated. I looked at the container, then back at Wayne. He knows we're doing this. Fourth latch. Click. The final latch felt different, tighter, more resistant. I had to apply more pressure. When it finally gave way, the sound was sharper, definitive. I positioned myself at the head of the container and gripped the lid. "Ready?" My team nodded, tension visible in every line of their bodies. I lifted the lid. For a second, nothing happened. Then black mist began pouring out, not like steam or smoke, but like liquid darkness, It flowed over the edges of the container and spread across the floor with unnatural speed. "What the—" Ronnie started. The mist rose rapidly, filling the cargo hold. Within seconds, it was up to our knees, then our waists. It didn't behave like normal smoke. It was too thick, too purposeful in its movement. "Can't see," Hunter shouted as the darkness reached our chests. I felt the mist swirl around me, cold but not freezing. It smelled wrong, like ozone and something else I couldn't identify. Not decay exactly, but something ancient. "Stay together," I ordered. "Form a circle, backs to center." I could hear my team shuffling, trying to follow orders, but the mist was blinding now. It had risen to fill the entire cargo hold, so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. "Captain," Wayne called. "Where are you?" "Here," I shouted. "Keep talking so we can—" A sound cut me off. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Uneven, dragging, coming from the direction of the container. "Anyone see that?" Ronnie's voice was tight. "See what?" I asked. "Movement. 3 o'clock. I strained to see through the darkness. The mist was starting to thin slightly, or maybe my eyes were adjusting. I could make out shapes now. My team, the crates, and something else. A figure moving toward us. "Hold position," I ordered, drawing my sidearm. The mist cleared enough that I could see it properly. The pilot, but not the frail old man we'd pulled from the cockpit. This thing wore the same uniform, but its body was twisted, decaying. Its face had changed, features elongated and wrong, eyes black and empty. "Jesus Christ," Hunter whispered. The thing's head snapped toward the sound. It moved faster than should have been possible, lurching toward Hunter. "Fire!" I shouted. Gunshots filled the cargo hold, muzzle flashes cutting through the remaining mist. I saw bullets impact the thing's body, tearing through the uniform and the flesh beneath. It staggered but didn't fall. It changed direction, coming straight for me now. I emptied my clip into its chest. Nothing. It kept coming. I dropped the empty gun and drew my combat knife as the thing closed the distance between us. Its hand shot out, impossibly fast, and grabbed my shoulder. Fingers dug in with crushing strength. I felt something crack under the pressure. Pain exploded through my body as I slashed upward with the knife, aiming for its throat. The blade connected, slicing deep, but no blood flowed. Just more of that black mist seeping from the wound. The thing's face was inches from mine now. Its mouth opened, wider than any human mouth should, revealing rows of teeth that hadn't been there before. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we'd made a terrible mistake. I twisted my wrist and drove the knife upward, right under the ribs where I figured something vital had to be. The blade sank in deep, meeting resistance, then pushing through. The thing that used to be our German pilot let out a sound I never want to hear again. Not a scream, exactly. More like 1,000 screams layered on top of each other, all coming from one throat that shouldn't have been able to make that noise. Its grip on my shoulder loosened. I stumbled backward, nearly falling on my ass as the creature released me. My shoulder throbbed where it had grabbed me, definitely fractured if not broken. I'd deal with that later. "Captain!" Wayne shouted from somewhere in the mist. "Stay back," I managed, keeping my eyes on the pilot thing. Black fluid, not blood. Something thicker and wrong poured from the wound I'd made. It wasn't flowing down like normal blood would. It was pulsing out, almost pushing itself from the body. The creature staggered, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. It reached toward the wound with hands that had grown too long, fingers stretched into something that didn't look human anymore. The black mist swirling around us started moving differently. At first I thought I was seeing things, but no, it was getting pulled toward the creature like water circling a drain. The mist streamed back into the wound I'd made, disappearing into the body. The creature fell backward, hitting the floor of the bomber with a wet thud. Its back arched unnaturally, spine bending at an impossible angle. The mouth opened in another silent scream as more mist poured back into the body. "What the hell?" Ronnie whispered next to me. "Nobody touch it," I said, taking a step back. The pilot's uniform started to sag, the body underneath it shrinking. The skin, what I could see of the face and hands, began to darken and pull tight against the bones. It was decomposing right in front of us, but way too fast. The process that should have taken months was happening in seconds. "Captain, Wayne started. "I don't know," I said, cutting him off. "Just stay back." Within maybe 15 seconds, there was nothing left but dust inside the uniform. The last wisps of black mist disappeared, and the cargo hold cleared enough that I could see all my team again. We stood there in a loose circle, weapons still drawn, staring at the empty clothes on the floor. "Is it dead?" Hunter asked, his voice cracking. "Yeah," I said. "I think—" A loud groan of metal interrupted me. The sound came from all around us, from the bomber itself. I looked up at the ceiling panels and saw something that didn't make sense. Rust, spreading across the metal like a time-lapse video. The pristine aircraft was aging before our eyes. "That's not possible," Wayne said, watching the walls. Another groan, louder this time. A rivet popped near my head and pinged off the floor. Then, another. And another. "Move," I said, then louder. "Move, get to the hatch." I didn't wait to see if they followed. I turned and ran toward the bomb bay where we'd entered. Behind me came the sound of boots on metal, my team right on my heels. The floor beneath us shuddered and buckled. A panel tore loose from the ceiling and crashed down, missing Hunter by inches. The whole aircraft was coming apart. "Go! Go! Go!" I shouted, pushing Hunter ahead of me. We reached the bomb bay just as the floor started to give way. Rust was spreading across everything, decades of decay happening in seconds. The metal groaned and twisted. Panels fell. The entire structure was collapsing. I shoved Hunter toward the hatch. "Out! Now!" He didn't hesitate, diving through the opening. Wayne was right behind him, then Elijah. I turned to make sure Ronnie was with us. He was maybe 10 feet back, running toward us as the floor disintegrated behind him. The whole tail section was collapsing inward. "Come on!" I yelled, reaching toward him. Ronnie lunged for the hatch just as a horrible screeching sound filled the air. The floor buckled upward, throwing him off balance. He stumbled, recovered, and made it to the hatch. I jumped first, landing hard on the packed snow outside. The impact sent a jolt of pain through my injured shoulder. I rolled to the side, making room for Ronnie. He was halfway through the hatch when I heard him cry out in pain. "My leg!" he shouted. "It's caught!" I turned to see him hanging halfway out of the hatch, his right leg trapped inside by a collapsed piece of the tail section. The metal had folded around his calf like a bear trap. "Hold on!" I scrambled back to him, ignoring the pain in my shoulder. Ronnie's face was tight with pain. "Can't pull free." I grabbed him under the arms and tried to yank him out, but he screamed, and I felt something tear. The metal had pierced his leg, not just trapped it. "Wayne," I called, "help me!" Wayne was there in an instant. Together we assessed the situation. The metal had cut deep into Ronnie's calf, probably hit the bone. Pulling him straight out would do more damage. "We need to bend this back," Wayne said, pointing to the jagged metal edge. I nodded. On 3. We both grabbed the edge of metal, careful of the sharp points. It was deteriorating in our hands, flaking away like ancient rust, but the core was still solid enough to hold Ronnie. 1, 2, 3. We pulled with everything we had. The metal groaned, resisted, then gave way with a sudden snap. Ronnie screamed again as his leg came free, blood pouring from a deep gash that ran from his knee almost to his ankle. Wayne and I dragged him clear of the aircraft as more panels collapsed. The entire structure was folding in on itself now, the metal turning to rust and flaking away in the wind. "Get pressure on that wound," I told Elijah, who was already pulling medical supplies from his pack. "On it, Captain." I turned back to look at the bomber. The process was accelerating now. The fuselage collapsed inward. The wings drooped and broke apart. The engines crumbled. In less than a minute, what had been a pristine World War II aircraft was nothing but a pile of rust and dust, and then even that began to disappear. The Arctic wind picked up the lighter particles, carrying them away in swirling patterns across the snow. The heavier pieces crumbled further until they too were light enough to be swept away. We stood there, the five of us, watching as every trace of the bomber vanished. Within 5 minutes, there was nothing left on the snow to show it had ever existed. The wind died down again, leaving an eerie silence. I looked at the empty space where the aircraft had been, then at my team. Hunter looked shell-shocked. Wayne was frowning, his analytical mind probably trying to make sense of what we just witnessed. Elijah was focused on bandaging Ronnie's leg, his hand steady despite what we'd just been through. And Ronnie, he caught my eye and gave a tight nod. He'd make it. "So," Wayne finally said, breaking the silence, "I guess our extraction's still about 3 hours out." I knelt in the snow beside Ronnie, my breath clouding in front of my face. The wind had picked up, cutting through my thermal gear like it wasn't even there. My shoulder throbbed where that thing had grabbed me, but I pushed the pain aside. "How's it looking?" I asked Elijah, who was working on Ronnie's leg with practiced hands. "Clean cut, but deep." Elijah didn't look up from his work. "Hit muscle. Missed the artery, thank God." Ronnie winced as Elijah applied pressure. "I can still walk on it. Just need to wrap it tight." "You're not walking anywhere," I said. "We'll figure something out." Wayne crouched next to me, his voice low. "We should move away from this area, Captain. Whatever that thing was." He glanced at the empty space where the bomber had been. "I don't trust that it's really gone." I nodded. "Hunter, what's our status on extraction?" Hunter was a few yards away, huddled over the radio. "Still 3 hours out, sir. Weather's getting worse. They said they'll try to push through, but no promises." "Great," I muttered. I stood up, scanning our surroundings. Nothing but white in every direction, the horizon blending with the sky. "All right, we need to set up a temporary shelter. Get Ronnie somewhere out of this wind and wait for extraction." It took us about 20 minutes to set up our emergency shelter. It wasn't much, basically a reinforced tent with a small heating unit, but it was better than sitting exposed. We got Ronnie inside, propped his leg up on a pack, and continued working on it. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the cut was nasty. "This'll need proper stitches when we get back," Elijah said, applying a field dressing. "Best I can do is clean it and keep it closed for now." Ronnie nodded, his face pale but composed. "Thanks, Doc." I stepped outside to check on Hunter, who was still monitoring the radio. "Any updates?" "Nothing new, sir." He looked up at me, his young face serious. "Captain, what was that thing? What happened back there?" I didn't have an answer for him. "I don't know, but right now, our priority is getting everyone home safely." We settled in to wait. The minutes crawled by, turning into an hour, then 2. The wind howled outside our shelter, temperatures dropping as darkness began to fall. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? We'd seen something impossible, something that shouldn't exist. And now 2 of our people were dead. At the 2-hour mark, Hunter's radio crackled to life. "Rescue 1 to ground team. Do you copy? Over." Hunter grabbed the radio. "Ground team to rescue 1. We copy. Over. We're approaching your coordinates. ETA 5 minutes. Conditions are rough. Need confirmation on landing zone status. Over." I took the radio from Hunter. "Rescue 1, this is Captain Cook. LZ is clear, flat terrain for half a mile in all directions. Wind from the northeast at approximately 30 knots. We'll mark with flares. Be advised we have 1 injured, walking wounded. Over." There was a pause before the response came. "Copy that, Captain. Be advised, we're following strict protocol after your earlier incident. We'll maintain safety distance until visual confirmation of team status. Over." "Understood, Rescue 1. We'll be ready. Over and out." I handed the radio back to Hunter and turned to the others. "They're 5 minutes out. Wayne, you and I will secure the LZ. Hunter, stay with Ronnie and Elijah. Once we signal, get Ronnie ready to move." Wayne nodded, and we stepped out into the bitter cold. The wind had picked up even more, driving ice crystals that stung any exposed skin. We walked about 50 yards from the shelter and set up flares in a wide circle, marking a landing zone. Within minutes, we heard the distant thump of helicopter blades. The sound grew louder until we could see the aircraft approaching through the swirling snow, its spotlight cutting through the darkness. It hovered above us, the downdraft from the rotors whipping up a blizzard of loose snow. The pilot was being cautious, keeping the helicopter higher than normal. I couldn't blame them. After what happened to Herman and McGuire, I'd be cautious too. I raised both arms above my head, waving the all-clear signal, then pointed to where our team was sheltered. The helicopter descended slowly, landing at the edge of our flare perimeter. The side door remained closed until the skids were firmly on the ground. Then it slid open, and two figures in cold weather gear stepped out, weapons at the ready. I recognized Captain Walter Payne immediately. He was a solid presence, moving with purpose through the snow toward us. Behind him was Lieutenant Grace Ramos, her face partially obscured by her hood, but her eyes alert and scanning. "Captain Cook," Payne called out, stopping a few yards away. "Status report. 4 personnel ready for extraction, 1 wounded but stable, no immediate threats." I kept my voice professional, hiding my relief at seeing them. Payne nodded, his expression serious. "We heard about Herman and McGuire. What happened?" "I'll brief you fully once we're airborne," I said. "Priority is getting my team out of here." Payne seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Lieutenant Ramos will assist with your wounded. Let's move quickly. This weather's only getting worse, and we're flying with extra precautions after what happened to the first bird." We returned to the shelter, where Elijah had Ronnie ready to go. Ramos helped assess his condition, then she and Wayne supported Ronnie between them as we made our way to the helicopter. Hunter and Elijah followed, carrying our essential gear. Once inside, Payne secured the door and signaled to the cockpit. The engines increased in pitch, and we lifted off, rising quickly into the darkening sky. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly as the ground fell away beneath us. "Course is set," Payne said, returning from a brief word with the cockpit. "Now, Captain, I need to know exactly what happened out there." I looked around at my team. Hunter was staring out the window. Wayne was checking Ronnie's bandages alongside Ramos. Elijah sat with his head back, eyes closed, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. "We found something," I said finally. "Something that shouldn't have been there." The debriefing at base took hours. I filled out my report exactly as events had occurred. The discovery of the bomber, finding the pilot, the crash of the first helicopter, the container, the black mist, the transformation and the disintegration of both the creature and the aircraft. I didn't leave anything out. I didn't try to make it sound more believable. I just wrote down what happened. When I finally got to my bunk, I fell into a dreamless sleep from pure exhaustion. The next morning, I was summoned to Colonel Elizabeth Ruiz's office. She was sitting behind her desk when I entered, my report open in front of her. She didn't look up when I saluted. "At ease, Captain," she said, still reading. Finally, she closed the folder and looked at me. "I've reviewed your report." "Yes, ma'am." "It's been classified, level 5, the entire incident." I blinked. "Ma'am." "Your mission is now recorded as a successful reconnaissance of a weather anomaly in Sector 7. That's all. The official record will state that Captain Herman and Lieutenant McGuire died due to mechanical failure during extreme weather conditions. There will be no mention of any aircraft discovery or unidentified personnel." I stood there, trying to process what she was saying. "With all due respect, Colonel, that's not what happened." "That's what happened, Captain." Her voice was steel. "The families of Herman and McGuire deserve closure, not questions that can never be answered. Your team deserves to move forward without the burden of an unexplainable event hanging over their careers." "And the truth?" I asked. "The truth," she said, leaning forward, "is that sometimes we encounter things that don't fit into our understanding of the world. When that happens, our job is to protect people, not just from physical threats, but from knowledge that serves no purpose except to disturb and disrupt." I didn't agree, but I knew better than to argue. Yes, ma'am. Over the next few weeks, I was debriefed by 3 different agencies. I never got their names, just their credentials. Military Intelligence, Scientific Research Division, something called the Special Circumstances Unit. I told them the same story each time. They asked the same questions, from different angles. They never offered explanations. Ronnie recovered well. The medical team did good work on his leg, and he was back on duty after 6 weeks. Wayne transferred to intelligence shortly after our return. His request, apparently. Elijah and Hunter stayed in my unit, but we never discussed what happened out there. Not directly. Sometimes I'd catch one of them looking at me, and I'd see it in their eyes. That shared knowledge, that burden. The official record showed a successful mission with an unfortunate accident. Herman and McGuire received posthumous commendations for bravery. Life went on. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I remember the sound that thing made. Not quite human, not quite animal. And I wonder what else is out there waiting to be found. The package showed up on a Tuesday. Just a plain manila envelope with my name and address typed on a white label. No return address. I almost tossed it in with the junk mail, but something about the weight of it made me curious. I was 3 months out from the Arctic. 3 months of debriefings and paperwork and carefully constructed lies. 3 months of waking up at 3 in the morning, feeling phantom pain in my shoulder where that thing had grabbed me. Emmy was grading papers in the living room when I brought the mail in. "Anything good?" she asked, not looking up from her stack of 5th grade math tests. Bill, credit card offer," I said, flipping through the stack. "And this." I set the envelope down on the kitchen counter and got a knife from the drawer, slid it under the flap and cut it open. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, worn at the edges. "What is it?" Emmy called from the other room. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy staring at the faces in the photo. 8 men in Luftwaffe uniform standing in front of a Heinkel He-111, the same bomber we'd found in the ice. The date stamp on the bottom read 1943. The men were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, except one. The pilot stood slightly apart from the others, his face serious. Someone had drawn a red circle around him. I knew that face. Had seen it transform into something else. "Colton?" Emmy was standing in the doorway now, concern in her voice. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just some military thing." She gave me that look she has, the one that says she knows I'm not telling her everything, but she's going to let it slide. For now. "I'm going to start dinner," she said. "Pasta, okay?" "Sounds good." She disappeared back into the kitchen and I flipped the photograph over. On the back, someone had written in neat block letters, "Lost in transit. Cargo experimental. Do not pursue." My mouth went dry. I slipped the photo back into the envelope and went to my office, closing the door behind me. Sat down at my desk and took it out again, studying the faces. They looked so normal. Just a bomber crew getting their picture taken before a mission. Did they know what they were carrying? Did they understand what was in that metal container? I opened my desk drawer and took out my lighter, flicked it open, and held the flame to the corner of the photo. The paper caught quickly, and I dropped it in the metal trash can, watching as the faces blackened and curled. When it was nothing but ash, I crushed it with a pencil, making sure nothing remained. The smell of the burning paper hung in the room. Not as bad as the other smell I couldn't forget. That rotting, ancient smell that came from the creature. Or the smell of burning aviation fuel when Herman and McGuire went down. I sat there for a long time, thinking about who might have sent the photo. Someone from intelligence, maybe. Or one of the nameless suits who'd questioned me for hours. A warning or a threat? Hard to say. Emmy knocked on the door. "Dinner's ready. Be right there." I emptied the trash can into the toilet and flushed, watching the last bits of ash swirl away. Washed my hands twice before joining Emmy at the table. She'd made spaghetti and garlic bread, my favorite. We ate and talked about normal things. Her Students, a movie we wanted to see that weekend, whether the gutters needed cleaning. I tried to focus, to be present, but my mind kept drifting back to that photograph, to the face I'd seen transform into something inhuman. That night, I dreamed of the bomber again, of black mist and rust spreading like a disease across metal, of Ronnie's leg trapped in twisted metal, of Herman's voice on the radio, panicked in her final moments. I woke up sweating at 2:37. Emmy slept peacefully beside me. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen for water, standing at the window and looking out at our quiet suburban street. Everything so normal, so safe. But I knew better now. The next few years passed in a blur of deployments. I led my team on conventional missions across 3 continents: Afghanistan, Syria, Colombia, places where the threats were human and made sense. I rose through the ranks, respected by my superiors, and trusted by those under my command. I never mentioned the Arctic, never told anyone about the bomber or the thing we'd found inside it. The incident remained classified, buried in files that would never see daylight. Herman and McGuire were remembered as victims of a tragic accident, their true sacrifice unknown. Ronnie recovered from his leg wound and stayed on my team for another 2 years before transferring to a training position. Wayne moved to intelligence, occasionally sending me cryptic emails that never quite said what he wanted to. Elijah and Hunter stayed the longest, solid and dependable, until I was promoted to a desk job that took me off active missions. Emmy and I had kids, a boy and a girl, James and Sarah. I told them stories about my deployments, carefully edited for young ears, tales of deserts and mountains and the good people I'd worked with. But never about the Arctic. Never about the thing that shouldn't have existed. The nightmares faded, but never completely disappeared. They'd come back when I was stressed or tired, vivid and real. I'd wake up feeling that grip on my shoulder again, smelling that rotting smell, hearing Herman's voice cutting out mid-sentence. I retired with full honors after 25 years of service. There was a ceremony, speeches, a plaque for the wall. Colonel Ruiz was there, gray-haired but still sharp-eyed. She shook my hand and said, "You did good work, Cook." I nodded, wondering if she was thinking about the same mission I was, if she ever questioned the decision to classify it, to bury the truth. "Thank you, ma'am," was all I said. After retirement, Emmy and I moved to a small town in Oregon. She took a job at the local elementary school, and I did consulting work for private security firms. It was quiet, peaceful, normal, the kind of life I'd always thought I wanted. But sometimes, when the wind howled around the house at night, I'd find myself standing at the window, looking out into the darkness, wondering what else was out there. What other secrets were buried in ice or ocean depths or remote jungles? Things that didn't fit into our understanding of the world. I kept tabs on my old team when I could. Ronnie retired to Florida, sent me Christmas cards with pictures of his grandkids. Wayne disappeared into the intelligence community, his name occasionally popping up on classified briefings I was consulted on. Elijah opened a medical practice in his hometown. Hunter stayed in, last I heard making Master Sergeant. None of us ever discussed what happened out there. Not directly. Sometimes I'd catch one of them looking at me, and I'd see it in their eyes. That shared knowledge, that burden. The understanding that we'd seen something that shouldn't have existed and survived when others hadn't. Emmy knew something had happened, of course. She'd been with me long enough to recognize the signs, the nights when I'd wake up gasping for air, the way I'd sometimes go quiet when certain topics came up. "You know you can tell me anything," she said once, her hand on mine as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset. "Whatever it is, it doesn't change who you are to me." I squeezed her hand. "Some things are better left in the past." She nodded, not pushing. It was one of the things I loved most about her. She understood that some spaces needed to remain private, even in a marriage. But the truth was, I didn't have words for what we'd encountered. How do you explain something that defies explanation? How do you describe a creature that shouldn't exist, a mist that moved with purpose, an aircraft that aged decades in minutes? The official record showed a successful mission with an unfortunate accident. Herman and McGuire received posthumous commendations for bravery. Life went on. But sometimes, when I'm alone and the house is quiet, I find myself thinking about that photograph, about the faces of men who lived and died decades before I was born, carrying something they didn't understand. I think about the warning scrawled on the back and wonder who sent it and why. And I wonder what else is out there, waiting to be found. What other secrets are buried in classified files or forgotten corners of the world? Things that don't fit into our neat categories of what's possible and what isn't. I carry the weight of having survived when others didn't, of knowing a truth that will never be acknowledged. It's a lonely kind of knowledge, but I've made my peace with it mostly. I focus on what's real and solid. Emmy's hand in mine, my children's voices on the phone, the weight of my grandson when I hold him, the life I've built since that day in the Arctic. It's enough. It has to be. I'm sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee that went cold about 20 minutes ago. The mountains look different in the morning light, all purple and blue against the sky. Emmy's inside making breakfast. I can smell the bacon through the open window. We've been in Oregon almost 6 years now. Retirement suits me better than I thought it would. I wake up when I want, take consulting gigs only when they interest me. We've got a decent place with enough land that the neighbors don't bother us, and Emmy's got her garden. The kids visit when they can. James brought his son last month. Little guy's almost 3 now, full of questions about everything. It's a good life. Normal. Quiet. Most days, I don't think about what happened up north. 20 years is a long time. The nightmares don't come as often anymore, maybe once every few months instead of every week. Progress, I guess. But then there are mornings like this one when I wake up with the taste of metal in my mouth and the feeling of cold that goes deeper than skin. Days when I remember things I've spent 2 decades trying to forget. I take a sip of the coffee. It's bitter. I drink it anyway. Truth is, I never really left that place behind. None of us did. We all carried something back with us. Something we couldn't explain, couldn't report, couldn't even really understand. The kind of experience that doesn't fit into the neat boxes we use to organize the world. Wayne calls it a categorization error. He's still with intelligence, though I think he's mostly behind a desk these days. Says the human mind needs to put things in familiar categories to process them. When something doesn't fit, we either force it to fit or we reject it entirely. What we saw, what we experienced, it didn't fit anywhere. I hear the screen door open behind me. Emmy steps out, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Breakfast is almost ready," she says. "You coming in?" I nod. "Be right there." She pauses, studies my face. After 30 years of marriage, she knows when something's off. "Bad night?" she asks. "Just thinking." She doesn't push. She never does. Emmy knows there are parts of my service I don't talk about. She respects the boundary, even if she doesn't understand it. That's one of the reasons we've lasted so long. "Don't let it get cold," she says, and goes back inside. I stand up, stretch my back. There's a twinge in my left shoulder, the one that thing grabbed. Doctors never found anything wrong with it. X-rays came back clean. But it still aches when the weather changes or when the memories get too close to the surface. Inside, Emmy's setting plates on the table, eggs, bacon, toast, normal breakfast on a normal morning. I sit down and we eat like nothing's wrong. Because nothing is wrong. Not really. Not anymore. After breakfast, I check my email. There's a message from Ronnie. He's planning a fishing trip next month, wants to know if I'm interested. We try to get together at least once a year, though we never talk about what happened. Not directly, but it's there in the spaces between words. in the things we carefully don't mention. I write back that I'll think about it. Truth is, I probably won't go. Being around the old team brings everything back too clearly. I shut the laptop and head outside to split some firewood. Physical work helps when the thoughts get too loud. Emmy says I'm the only retiree she knows who chooses to split wood by hand when we could afford a splitter. I tell her I like the exercise. What I don't say is that the rhythm of it, the focus, the controlled violence, keeps me grounded when my mind wants to drift back to places it shouldn't go. The axe comes down, and the wood splits clean. I set up another log. Sometimes I wonder if what we encountered was even real, if maybe the cold and stress got to us, made us see things that weren't there. But then I remember Herman and McGuire. Their deaths were real enough. And I remember Ronnie's leg, the scar he still carries, the way the metal folded around his calf like it was alive. The next log splits with a crack that echoes across the yard. I've had 20 years to think about what happened, 20 years of reading classified reports that Wayne shouldn't have shared with me, 20 years of looking for patterns, for explanations, for anything that might make sense of what we saw. Here's what I know. That bomber shouldn't have been there. Not just because no German aircraft were recorded in that region, because it was impossible. The condition it was in, preserved like it had landed yesterday, not 70 years earlier. The pilot with a pulse. The warning carved into that metal box. I've come to believe we crossed into something that day. Not another place exactly, more like another layer of reality that occasionally overlaps with ours. Places where the rules we take for granted don't apply, where time moves differently, where things can exist that shouldn't be possible. I set up another log, split it, set up another. Wayne found records of similar incidents over the years. Nothing exact, but echoes. A patrol in Vietnam that reported walking into a village that wasn't on any map, where everyone was frozen in place like statues. A submarine crew in the 60s that logged 48 hours of time but only experienced 20. A research team in Antarctica that disappeared for 3 days and reappeared with no memory of where they'd been. All classified, all unexplained, all buried in files that most people will never see. I finish with the wood and stack it against the side of the house. My shirt soaked through with sweat, which feels good. Real. My shoulder aches. But it's the normal kind of pain that comes from physical work, not the phantom pain of remembered terror. Inside, I shower and change. Emmy's gone to her book club in town. The house is quiet. I pour myself another cup of coffee and sit at the kitchen table. I used to think I'd tell someone someday. Write it all down as a record, just in case it ever happened again. But I know better now. Some truths don't set you free. They just mark you as unstable, unreliable. The kind of person whose judgment can't be trusted. Besides, what would I say? That I saw a German pilot from World War II transform into something inhuman? That I watched a 70-year-old bomber age decades in minutes? That I believe there are places where reality thins out and things slip through from somewhere else? I'd sound crazy. Hell, sometimes I think I am crazy. But then I remember the others saw it too. Ronnie, Wayne, Elijah, Hunter. We don't talk about it, but we know. We were there. Herman and McGuire paid the price for our discovery. Whatever was in that metal container, that thing that had been the pilot, it didn't want to be found. Or maybe it did. Maybe it had been waiting all that time for someone to open the box, to let it complete whatever cycle it was part of. I finish my coffee and rinse the cup in the sink. Through the window, I can see the mountains in the distance. Solid, unchanging. I wonder what secrets they hold, what other thin places might exist in the world, where reality bends and breaks. I've made my peace with not knowing, with carrying this knowledge that I can't share. It's a burden, but it's also a responsibility. Someone needs to remember what happened, even if it's just us. Even if we never speak of it aloud. The phone rings. It's James, checking in. We talk about normal things, his job, the baby, when they might visit next. I listen to him describe his ordinary problems and feel grateful that this is his reality. that he'll never have to question the fundamental nature of the world the way I have. After we hang up, I sit for a while in the quiet house. I'm one of the lucky ones, I know that. I made it back. I built a life. I found ways to live with what I know. Some days are harder than others. Some memories don't fade the way they're supposed to. But I've learned to carry them without being crushed by their weight. The truth is out there, like that old TV show used to say. But some truths aren't meant to be shared. Some experiences can't be explained or categorized or filed away neatly. They can only be carried, like stones in your pocket that you turn over and over, feeling their edges, reminding yourself they're real even when everything else says they can't be. I carry the weight of having survived when others didn't, of knowing a truth that will never be acknowledged. It's a lonely kind of knowledge, but I've made my peace with it mostly. I focus on what's real and solid. Emmy's hand in mine, my children's voices on the phone, the weight of my grandson when I hold him, the life I've built since that day in the Arctic. It's enough, it has to be.